Hello, welcome to Divisive Issues, the foul mouse powerful comic book podcast where two comic fans and two non-comic fans talk about controversial comic books and comic book history. I'm Sly.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Darryl. And I pulled everyone into the spiral with me for this episode for Junji Itober.
Yes! Because this is the third October in a row that we've done a Junji Ito story. And usually we do it with other stuff. Like the first time it was part of a whole horror manga short story collection. Last year we did Gyo and Sabrina. But this year we're doing such a massive Junji Ito book that I think we're going to spend the whole month on it.
Was Amigara Fault 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I'm caught in the spiral.
So in case you don't know, you're like, why they keep talking about spirals, the book we're reading is Uzumaki, which was written in a serial format. It appeared weekly in Big Comic Spirits from 1998 to 1999, and Uzumaki is Japanese for spiral. And this book is literally all about spirals in a town.
I only knew that was Spiral because of Naruto, because his name is Uzumaki and he has all those spirals on him.
The best way I could sum it up
Goddamn.
is I told one of our listeners, Elle, that I was reading Uzumaki and she goes, wait, is that the spiral one? And I was like, yeah. And she goes, I think I'm going to skip these episodes because I read the first chapter and I was like, nope, not for me.
Yeah, so just to give a little bit of backstory on the thought process, Uzumaki was the original premise by Junji Ito was to have stories based on people living in a traditional Japanese terraced house based on the house that Junji Ito grew up in. But he got inspired by the shape of a mosquito coil and decided to make what if the building was shaped in a spiral pattern. And then he started thinking about the spiral pattern and how it appears in random places throughout life in general. And
so this is going to be like a manga like Gurren Lagann, right? It's spiral power.
Yes, and that's exactly what I was about to bring, because it's actually an inversion on traditional Japanese tropes on the spiral, because spiral is usually a good trope in Japanese culture, from stuff like Gurren Lagann to the idea of infinity.
Naruto.
Naruto. Well, Naruto was like a curse, but
It was power. It was still power, though.
yeah, and usually it's you draw spirals on kids' cheek to show warmth. It's like a way to show warmth and kindness in characters. So he said, what if I corrupted that imagery and made a spiral into a horrific thing?
And it is horrific. This is
one
of the most horrific things I've ever read.
Yeah, so I'm like a baby when it comes to horror. I get so scared from everything. And usually I don't really like horror very much, but before we really get into it, I just want to say I think Junji Ito's one of my favorite creators now.
I definitely agree. I read this and I was like, I've never really enjoyed horror that much.
Yeah,
but, it's
same.
these big page drawings are the creepiest things I've ever seen. I loved Amigara Fault too, and I didn't read Yo, but I was really I couldn't stop.
Gyo's funny because it starts really terrifying and then it gets really weird at the end.
Where Uzumaki gets weird, but I still felt like I had to take a break because I read this yesterday and I got halfway through and I was like, I gotta walk away from this for a little bit because I am
Getting pulled into the spiral.
Uncomfortable the whole time. And okay, you guys are gonna make fun of me, but I bought the hardcover for this and Gyo yesterday, and I was like, I know where I could put them, and I put them in my room. And no joke, this morning I was like, I think I'm gonna put this in a room where I don't sleep.
Didn't want it taking up.
Yeah, it's just because I just kept looking at it and I was like, there's something about Ito's art that is so engrossing.
And that's going back to Elle's comment about that she's going to skip it. I think a real shame about this and talking about Ito's work is that you don't get to see the art. And that's with every Divisive Issues thing, where when we talk about it, it's really important to read it so that you can see it. But especially in horror, a lot of it rests not on the plot or character interactions, but it's on the when something terrible happens and Ito takes a full page to show you this is how bad it gets. It's we can't capture how truly awful it gets.
In one of the afterwards, Ito talks about why he loves spirals so much, because it automatically draws your eye to spiral around and follow the path until you get to the center. So he uses spirals in his art throughout the book to consistently tell you where to look, but in a way that you kind of approach it from the side, so you see the horrifying thing in your peripheral at first, and then you spiral towards it. And like I don't know how effective that is every single page, but I know like just the way as I was turning pages and looking through it, it's like because we even talked about it last episode with Identity Crisis, where there's like you turn the page and it's all white and it's like, you know, like this reveal. But the way he does reveals in this book are like nothing I've ever seen. I think.
I also think it is a shame that like because I do think Junji Ito is like a 10 out of 10 artist, and I think like his writing alone doesn't signify his greatness. So we'll describe some stuff. It might sound silly. Like the
and sometimes it is.
Yeah, and the creepiest part of this story for me will probably sound the silliest to an outside listener. And like I do think that Junji Ito's like character work and some of his writings, like I think like some of his dialogue is very blunt. Like a character literally says, "I am becoming a recluse now." Like and some characters they just I'm the reporter. Like the profession is how you would describe them. Like there's not much to their characters.
Yep.
But it's really the art that really
a lot of his characters too are just people that things happen to, and that's kind of their thing. Is just like I'm just a person that like the main character in this story. Literally, she's there to witness these events, and that's it. She's not there to like necessarily stop them, or she tries to like change some things, but she's mostly there just so Ito can draw what she sees.
And they do the traditional horror trope that this is maybe the only thing I didn't like about it is when you have the two main characters hanging out and bad things are about to happen, a random person always comes in and gets killed by the random thing, so that they can witness it. And it's like every time they're the only survivors of the thing. And it's like it's a very horror trope thing that you're like, oh, I can watch the horrible thing happen to this person who happened to look like me, so they got taken instead or whatever.
That's something I usually dislike because I think it's important for horror to have really well developed characters and to feel that every character has a possibility of dying at any point. Yeah, but I think the art negates most of the flaws. In
which I agree with you there too. Where it's just like because even some crazy things are going to happen to the main characters, and they are still fine.
Yeah.
But it's like it's still like kind of okay because you've grown attached to them, and you kind of just want to see how deep this spiral goes.
Yeah.
And
so you don't
one thing too. Now I know that like I don't know horror very well, so I don't know how common this is. But in a lot of the horror I've experienced, I feel like there is a lot of like violence against women. And the thing that I really liked about this book is I feel like it never felt like the main character was, she was mostly there to witness it, but I felt like she was still like, she wasn't necessarily like always being like, I don't know how to put it. I just felt like there was things that I was expecting to go in a cliched way as far as like, sexualization or like violence towards her in some of the chapters that it never got there. And I was like really happy with that.
She gets brutalized less than the men probably.
And there's also scenes where like a bunch of men approach her and I'm like, oh, I've seen this scene a million times, but it's that the whole like sexual violence that I see or the threat of sexual violence that I see in a lot of horror is completely absent from this book.
It's because it doesn't fit in with spirals. They're like they don't want her body. They want to spiral her.
Yeah, she basically fills the role of the male protagonist from Gyo, maybe to a less stoic degree. But
and it's kind of funny because her like the love interest she's paired with this guy, it feels somewhat of the role of like the love interest from Gyo, where just terrible things are happening to them and you're like, this person's living the worst life possible.
I think this one has a better balance because I do think her boyfriend Suichi is I thought he was my favorite character because like he is like a damaged character through all the events that happens to him, but he is very important to saving the protagonist's main points and like directing her.
But it felt to me like them as a pair were like exploring this world,
for sure.
And I feel like I don't see that a whole lot, especially when it's like these are the sole survivors. Like you see that a lot, you know. I've seen that story a lot, but I felt like this was much more balanced and much. I don't want to say like progressive because I wouldn't call her like a feminist character.
No, it's not.
But
especially
like,
since what they do with women later on.
Yeah, but like I felt like it didn't go in a lot of directions I was bracing myself for it to go, and I definitely like commended it for that.
Yeah. All right, so getting into this story,
I've stalled as long as I can.
What the story is it's about this town and these events that happen to this town, and the town's Kurozu, and Kairi's a high schooler there, of course, and her boyfriend Shuichi goes to another school in like a neighboring town. And basically, like, this town's got like a lot of weird things. Like, there's sirens that go off, like warnings that drill into your ears, and then there's just whirlwinds that go down the streets. And Shuichi wants her to come with him and pretty much leave the town because he's like, something's wrong with this town.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the story opens with her seeing Shuichi's father, who's just looking at a wall. He's like, look, there's a spiral pattern on this wall. And she's like,
A wall in the alley, by the way. Like, she's walking by an alley, and this guy's, like, sitting in the alley.
And he doesn't actually say anything. He's just staring at this spiral shape.
Yeah.
yeah.
And she's like, that's fucking weird.
One of the things I wanted to know about you guys is when Shuichi's like, we gotta get out of this town, something's wrong with it. Did you ever anticipate the direction this book goes in?
No, but he pushes for it so much, and I'm like, it took her way too long to ever, like, the whole time Kirie's like, it's not that weird, just all this crazy shit, like, it's my town. It's like, at a certain point, I'd be like, I'm fucking moving.
Well, I feel like there's an implication here that it's
Later on,
always been pretty weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is why there's the siren and the whirlwinds and stuff.
Yeah.
And later on, they really do say why.
Later on they do, but I feel like things are escalating way more than they should have tolerated before she tried.
I know.
Yeah, there were times that I'm like, why the fuck are you still here?
And also, and to clarify, this is, in the beginning, this is more like a short story format where it goes from story to story, showing all these different weird encounters with spirals.
It really doesn't become overarching until like the second half.
Yes,
Even like the very last, it's like the last part of the second half too. It's like mostly each chapter is its own story.
A different spiral event.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I really, really liked about it is because this concept of a spiral seems so simple, but he uses
so,
it
like,
in
benign.
so many different ways.
Yep.
I also think it plays up to Junji Ito's strengths because he always has like really cool concepts, and in this way he's able to introduce a new one every chapter and just have it come full circle by the end of that story. And
whereas like we saw like Gyo was really stretching with the fish walking on land concept to the point where it started getting really silly at the end.
Not enough fort-powered monsters in this one, I think.
Yeah. Whereas he does a lot more like spiral work. Like, for instance, so Shuichi's father, after Shuichi tells Kiari, it's like, we need to leave because this town, he says, is contaminated with spirals. And he's 100% right.
But she's like, you're crazy. What are you talking about?
That's what I love is he's never like wrong about this in this book. As he starts to look like more and more crazy as he gets like darker and darker eyes and sleeps less. This poor guy.
Yeah.
But Shuichi's father goes to see Kairi's father, who's a potter, and he's like, you need to make things with a spiral shape. Yes, like it's beautiful art. And her dad's like, oh, well, okay, I guess so. And
If that's what you want.
yeah, it cuts to like his room, and there's just he has a bunch of like spiral fabrics and
dad's room.
objects. Yeah, Shuichi's father.
It's a real like evidence dungeon kind of like. He's just got a bunch of shit pinned up on the walls and springs hanging
He's
from the
spinning
ceiling.
his soup so it makes a spiral. He spins the bathtub so it makes all the water makes a spiral, and he sits.
You get to see his butt. That's good.
He gets really upset because the wife makes him soup, and he's like, I can't eat without those spiral patterned fish cakes. And then he stirs the soup, and he's like, okay.
I love in the bathroom tub scene because they show, like Ryan suggests, they show you getting naked and getting into the tub and making a whirlpool and sitting in the tub. But I like it because when Shuichi explains this to Kiari, she starts laughing. He's like, I know it sounds funny, but it's fucking weird. Like, my dad's fucking going crazy.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is the theme of this book. I know it sounds funny, but it's fucking weird.
Yeah, and like she's like, you're just overreacting, and he's like, fine, come over for dinner. See what a fucking maniac my dad is.
Yeah, and it's good evidence because she comes over and he's fighting with Shuichi's father's fighting with his wife because she threw out all of his spirals.
Yeah.
And she says like, you have to wake up, you have to go to work.
Because he stopped going to work when he
He always looks at spirals all day.
So he tells
It's
her,
almost as if his life is spiraling out of control.
Oh my god! And then this scene was when I was like, "What the fuck?" Because he's like, you know what? I don't need to collect them. You can express the spiral through your own body. And he pulls off his glasses and he starts having his eyes just roll around in different directions separately to like spiral around.
Yeah.
And it is the creepiest shit I've ever seen.
And that's when Kiari stops laughing, and she's like, "You're right. This is fucking weird."
And he's laughing with his eyes rolling around in different directions.
Yeah, so then Kairi goes and she brings over the pottery that the dad made, but Shuichi's dad doesn't want it because he's like, no, like, you can make spirals with your own body. So, for instance, he sticks out his tongue and he rolls his tongue up into, like,
his
a
tongue gets like
spiral.
really long.
Yeah, it becomes like a fucking, like a serpent's tongue. Like,
Yeah, and then she runs away just past this guy that brings in something, and we don't know what it is, but we find out later because it cuts to her father, Shuichi's father, being cremated at a funeral, and he's like, "Do you want to know how my father died?" And he has to tell her
because they told everyone he fell down the stairs.
Yeah, but when Shuichi and his mother, they had gone to a hospital because they wanted to take him there, and when they came back to go see him, all they found was this giant wooden, like, circular crate thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when they open
it looks like a thinner barrel.
Yeah, and when they open it up, he has spiraled himself inside of it. Like, he got inside of it, but he, like, curled up, like, 20 times in circles.
It doesn't even look like a body anymore. It just looks like a long spiral with fleshy human parts. Like
you can notice his feet and his head and his chest and hands.
And it's a full double page of them seeing this, and this is the scene when our dear listener Elle was like, "Nope, think I'm good with this whole thing."
This is just the start of people really embracing the spiral too.
Yeah, because this messed me up when I first read it, and rereading it, I'm like, "Oh, this is nothing."
It's a really disgusting thing. His tongue is sticking out, his eyes are bulging, and seeing the human body like broken and like spiraled like that is just so terrible.
It's just like Elongated Man in Identity Crisis.
And to boot, after they tell the story, they find out by looking up ahead that the smoke from the cremation has created a spiral in the sky too.
Yeah, so the black smoke of the father is creating this huge black spiral in the sky, and then starts swirling down towards the water at the beginning of chapter 2.
It creates like a face of the father, and out of his mouth, like his tongue starts spiraling down into Dragonfly Pond, which is a pond in the middle of town, which keeps reappearing.
And his wife starts screaming like, "Oh, it's him! Get away from me!" Everyone thinks she's going crazy, like thinking she sees the father in the smoke.
Yeah, she starts screaming, then she starts laughing, and then she has to be taken to a hospital, and she sees people like the nurse has a bun in her hair that spirals around, so she's like, get the nurse away from me. She can't have any kind of like spirals in the room, and she freaks out so much she looks at her hands.
First she cuts off her hair, then she looks at her hands.
Oh yeah. She cuts off her hair because she wants to get all the spirals out. Then she looks at her hands, and the fingerprints kind of have a spiral pattern too. So she takes scissors and she cuts off the tips of her fingers and toes.
And Shuichi explains, like, every time she sees a spiral, she sees that image of, like, the father just being, like, spiraled in that thing.
She sees his dead body, but in this fake image in her mind he's alive talking to her, saying, "Join me in the spiral."
So she gets, like, really phobic around it, and then she's seeing psychologists and stuff, and they're like, "Hey, you're still afraid of spirals? Maybe you should go to the psychiatric ward." And Shuichi notices, by looking at this anatomy chart on the wall, he's shocked to see that in the human ear, the cochlea is a spiral inside the inner ear canal.
And he's worried that his mom's going to find out she has spirals inside of her.
Yeah, so he wheels her out, and the rest of the chapter is like her hearing the sirens from the like loudspeakers throughout town, and she's like, it pierces through my ears, and he's looking nervously like, I hope she doesn't realize. And then other things like one night a centipede tries to crawl.
This like fucked me up, man.
It tries to crawl into her ear as she's sleeping, and when she looks at it it curls up into a spiral, and it has her husband's head, and he's saying, "Come join me in the spiral. You still have spirals in your body. I want to crawl
he says, like,
ears.
I want to go to your ears because your ears have spirals in them." So they're lying to you. You have spirals in your ears. I want to go inside them because there's spirals in there. And she's like freaking out next day, like, "Oh, are there spirals inside me? Spirals inside my ears? Like, what the fuck's going on?" And they like have to hide the doctor's chart that shows
she's like, "Just tell me this is done." She's like, "Let me go look at the anatomy chart." And they're like, no, you can't. And then he's like, "Oh, I threw it out. You know, it was old. I've never heard of spirals in the ears." And she's like, I fucking know it.
It's like this really like drawn out, because like as the reader you're like, oh my, she's gonna have to find them eventually, that she has spirals in her ears. And her IV bag, like the drip, it starts to like the fluid starts to spin around, and it forms her husband's face again, and he's like, there are spirals in your ears. So she's like, okay, and she takes a knife.
She's like, okay. She's not okay, she's just screaming and freaking out.
Takes scissors out of her drawer.
Yeah, she takes the scissors out of her drawer, and she says, I'll get them out. And it cuts away before she jams them into her ears, but it has like such a good horror twist of what happened is she jabbed them into her ears to get them out. But she not only destroyed her sense of hearing, but she destroyed her sense of balance too. So she's in a constant state of vertigo and spinning around.
While wrapped in bandages.
So as she's as she's dying, she's saying, "I don't want to become a spiral. I don't want to become a spiral." So she's like, in her mind, she's swirling, and like that's why I talk about like things coming full circle at the end of the story, because like Darryl said, she was afraid of spirals, and now her worst fear became even more true because of her fear. Like now she's
not
constantly.
only does she have the vertigo, and then as she dies and they cremate her body, she also becomes a spiral in the sky. So she becomes a spiral in both ways. Like her last experience as a human is
her body is covered in spirals, and then her smoke creates spirals.
God.
I do want to thank Ito for not showing us her stabbing herself in the ear, because this is maybe the only like mercy he shows the audience.
Someday we need to read the guy that Ito was inspired by, Umezu, who we read like one of the ghost stories back when we did the Itober thing.
Is that the one with the heart?
The first story I read was of like this things emerging from a girl's eye, and this guy like draws all of it, which is why I was like, man, I kind of want to see that, because there's such like gnarly, grotesque drawings.
That's okay. I'm good.
Next year.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm busy that month,
Because
guys.
that's been the most messed up story I think I've read, horror wise. There's so many crazy things that happen in it.
Darryl.
This is my lifeblood. Give me the spiral. There are spirals in my head.
We're gonna find Darryl in a press, just like mushed himself into his spiral one day.
Oh man.
So chapter 3.
Yeah, it takes a different turn, and it's about this girl that shows up in Kiari's class, who she has a scar like above her head that she hides with her bangs. It's like a crescent moon shape, and she says that it has like the power to draw in boys that she likes.
That's what everyone says about her. So basically, all the guys love her, and all the girls hate her because all the guys love her.
Yeah, because she takes boyfriends from people and stuff.
Yeah, basically, they give her, like, origin story where she was, like, trying to impress a boy in elementary school. She falls on the monkey bars, gets a small scar on her forehead, and then, like, since then, like, she became friends with that boy, and since then, she just, like, gets boys to fall in love with her, and then she, like, breaks up with them.
Yeah, so the other girls claim that she had this crescent scar on her forehead gives her the magic power, but she said, no, it's just a crescent scar, but for whatever reason, like, I've just been lucky with boys ever since.
Yeah, and then she's like, oh, Kiari, you're supposed to be going to see your boyfriend, because one of the things I like in this story is all these stories are kind of unrelated for the most part until the end, but there is a kind of through line to how they're connected, like how the first story of the dad led to the mom, and now Kiari has to go see Shuichi because he's just staying home and he's not eating because both of his parents are dead.
Just fucking died like in a week.
Yeah, so Kiari goes to give him lunch every day, the nice anime girlfriend thing to do. And then this girl decides to go with Kiari, and she's like, I want to see your boyfriend.
And Kiari thinks, like, don't steal my boyfriend.
Yeah, why does she just say, no, you can't.
She has to be polite.
Well, she says no a couple times, but she keeps insisting.
Yeah. I want every boy ever. Fuck you.
So they go inside, and, like, he has no lights on. There's, like, it's his face is overcast, and he's just like, hey. And as soon as he sees this girl, he does not like her because he knows there's spirals. There's spirals somewhere around her, dealing with her. He can't trust her.
Yeah, he says there's something mesmerizing about her. It's like looking down from a high place, like vertigo. It's like looking into a spiral.
Yeah, you have to watch out. She's a spiral.
Look out, she's a spiral. Kiri's like, you're fucking crazy.
So he's terrified of this, and she shows up at his house late one night, and she's like, what is happening? Like, you're the first guy that's ever been, like, disgusted by me. And she's like, how can you reject me? Like, how? And he's like, it's your forehead. And she looks in a mirror, and her crescent has slowly formed into a spiral. And she's like, I have no idea what this is. And she slowly starts getting really consumed by the fact that he's not liking her. And she keeps going to his door and, like, knocking on it and being like,
yeah, well, she
Let me
says,
in."
like, please, I've never felt this way before. All the boys I knew couldn't stop thinking about me. But now I know what it feels like. I can't stop thinking about you.
You know, like she wants what she can't have. So.
And Kirie finally is like, I don't want you visiting him anymore. Like, this is the line I draw.
And she's like, fuck you, he's my boy, gonna be my boyfriend. Fuck you.
And then one of the whirlwinds that just randomly goes through the streets in the town, like it goes by and it blows up her bangs, and the spiral in her head has gone into like a concave spiral through her skull. Like, it doesn't show like brain or bone. It just like her face spirals inwards into like this wound, this cavity.
It's one of those images that, like, Ito does such a good job at showing that it's 3D, but you can't, like, it still doesn't make any sense. But, like, that's what makes it so unnerving, is because, like, the image itself it's not possible.
Yeah, some of the best horror is like the really unexplainable, like you just can't
Yeah.
even describe it. That's why people love like Lovecraft.
Yeah.
And but I should mention, Junji Ito said he was inspired by Lovecraft when he wrote this.
That makes sense.
And this is a very like Lovecraftian story at its core. So then another guy goes and he's like, please, he starts talking to this girl with the spiral in her head, and it's like, please go out with me, like I'm drawn to you, I can't get away from you.
So this guy says, I need to talk to your girlfriend, to Suichu. Meet me at this place. And then Suichu calls Kiari, and he's like, oh, come meet me here. I don't know what's going on. And this was all the plan from the girl, Azami, because she told this boy, I love Suichu, bring him here and I'll go out with you.
Yeah.
So all 4 of these people meet in this one spot in the middle of the night.
Yeah, and before they do so, Kairi goes and she sees the girl, and she's wearing a hat, and she takes it off, and the spiral...
We should clarify, well, Kiari thought the first time she saw the concave thing, it was just her imagination. Like, that can't be true. It's bullshit.
Mm-hmm. But now, when she takes off her hat, the concave, like, the wound has now covered, like, a fourth of her head.
It's like drilled all the way to the back of her head. Is like
yeah, and it's so big, it shows, like, her bare eyeball sitting there. And then Ito has 4 panels of the eyeball spiraling around to the center and disappearing. Which, again, is, like, one of the great, like, what I love about some of his stuff, where it's so, like, ludicrous, but really grotesque at the same time. Of this girl, and because she's just sitting there, like, staring kind of blankly, being like, it's big, isn't it? Like, the wound. And then when she finally gets up to Shuichi, her whole face down to, like, her mouth has been covered by the spiral.
And they do, like, a side profile thing, and it literally is, like, a part of her face is just, like, part of her head is just gone.
She looks like great DC villain Automatopoeia.
Yeah.
It's almost from, like, the jaw upwards of the skull is just gone.
Yeah.
And then the guy that's interested in her reaches his hands for it. He's like, is that bone? And when he goes to touch her wound, he starts getting sucked into her head. And there's just like this image of him, like his 2 legs sticking out as he goes sucked down into her face and her body. Well, like Kairi and Shuichi goes up into a tree to get away because he's like, this is like, we gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
And they pretty much just watch as she slowly gets consumed, like, by the
She
spiral.
sucks herself inside. Like, her body's just going inside her.
Yeah, like her
spiral now.
arm breaks off and sucks into her wound as it covers down to her chest and then her stomach. And then she's just gone.
And that's that one. That's that story.
So, a bunch of other people, like some other people that end up dying in Kurozu, this town, they get cremated too, but the same thing keeps happening where all of the ash in the air and the dust starts swirling down into the lake.
So I have a question. Is cremation like the standard in Japan?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Man, I was just curious. Figured a bunch of weebs would know.
So how this is related is because this story is about Kairi's dad, who, if you remember, he was a potter. And he's staring at the kiln one night, and he's like, wow, this is... It just shows him looking through, like, into the little window into the kiln, and he's like, something is going on in here. Like, he looks really freaked out by it, but he doesn't want, like, his wife to come over and look. He's like, don't, just go back to the house. Go away. And then it cuts to an art show where he has all these art pieces that have...
It looks like a bunch of art. It looks like, because he's a potter, like it's all these clay pieces that look like they are like droopy and melting.
Mm-hmm.
And on the patterning on all of them is these spirals, and the people watching are like, oh, it's like the firing effect, which happens in pottery sometimes, but I've never seen it make spirals before. And he's like, yeah, I'm using a new type of clay.
Yeah, and people are at the show are like, these are really interesting, but no one buys them because they're too freaky to buy.
Yeah, and the dad's like grousing about this at home. He's like, they don't know art when they see it. And Kairi's like,
Kirie's little brother
Yeah.
is like, hey, there's a face on this one.
Yeah,
And it in all the spirals, it's the face of Shuichi's dad and mom.
yeah. And they notice there's other faces of people that look like they were people that had recently died in the town.
They invite Shuichi over for dinner because he becomes such a recluse. And mom's like, oh, bring him over, we'll have a healthy meal once in a while. And
Yeah, he's literally like struggling against Kairi. She's pulling him to
'cause
the house.
It's because he's like, you live next to Dragonfly Pond. I don't want to go there.
Yeah, he says that the pond is infested with spirals. And she brings him over, and they have spaghetti. And you're like, oh, maybe like the spaghetti will be spirals or something, but it's not.
is it spaghetti or is it just noodles? Do they have
think it's
spaghetti?
just
Oh, it's noodles, yeah. They don't have-
I don't think they have spaghetti in Japan.
But he really goes to town. He's like eating like crazy.
Yeah.
And then, as he eats to the bottom, and it's that fucking shitty, spirally, droopy plate, and they're like, "What the fuck? Why'd you give him this as to eat off?"
Yeah, and the dad's
he's
like, it was a special occasion. I wanted him to like enjoy the art and stuff.
But they actually, because I said the same thing where I was like, why would they give him this? But her dad raised a valid point. He's like, I thought he would really appreciate it. His dad loved spirally ceramics. He ordered that special one.
Yeah, so they reveal that the dad's new clay is the clay from Dragonfly Pond, which is where all the cremation spirals have been going into.
Which is where the ash from the cremation spirals down into. So they basically made him eat a plate made from his mom and dad.
Yeah.
So he runs out of the house because he's like disgusted by this.
He's got to puke, like literally, not just like, I'm revolted by this. He's like, literally, I am disgusted, like, no.
I like that Kiari has to explain to her parents, it's like, that clay might be made of dead people, and her mom's like, but dear, like, it's so rude to run out while someone's feeding you.
and she goes and sees her dad, like, coming out of the lake with more
It's a
clay.
great scene of her staring out into the water, and the dad goes to get the clay, but it's not just like him going out and taking the stuff at the edge of the pond. It's him submersing himself, like walking down into the water.
Like a fucking like creature from Black Lagoon. Or something
Yeah.
like that.
And what's great too is like it shows the father doing pottery after this, and it's even like pottery, like what do they call those things?
What
The things you spin. The spinning thing. And pottery.
pot spirals, I think.
Spinning plate.
Yeah,
The
whatever.
thing they do in Ghosts, where they have the hand scene.
Yeah, like even pottery is a spirally activity. Like it's called spinning when you are spinning.
That's
the pot,
what I mean.
right?
Is there's so many little things that involve spirals in this book that like he doesn't really reuse ideas often. It's constantly reinventing itself as different ways to look at spirals.
Because Ryan, spirals are everywhere. This is
Yeah,
what
I
he's been trying to
know.
tell us.
But it's interesting and good.
I agree with you. Like, I love how much like he keeps coming back to this concept, but you're never like this is. I mean, there are some times where it's like this is kind of silly, but it's some of the stuff that like it's still pretty neat. Like for instance, so he spins all the pottery and everything looks normal. Nothing looks weird or warped or has spirals. It's when he goes and he puts it in the kiln for it to harden that's when it happens. And Kiari goes to visit him one night. And he's like asleep laying down, and she stares through the window, and inside is like all the pottery, but it's actually just like a whole bunch of faces, and out of their mouths are like all spiraling stuff, and they're all
Screaming, saying, "It's around fire, help us."
And it's like it really is like a hellscape picture. Like it's a full page of just these tentacles and mouths and screaming faces and spirals, all just screaming, "The heat, help!"
And even the fire is spiraling around them.
Yeah,
and Shuichi's own parents are in there saying, "Shuichi, help me, please." Just the idea that he's going for here is that it's like torturing their souls.
Yeah.
yeah.
So Kairi starts hearing it. Like she tries to go to bed, but she can hear them screaming all the time. And then Shuichi calls her to see what's up, and then he starts hearing it through the phone. And it's like something's wrong, and so he books it from his house, and he goes over to her house.
Yeah, because the screaming apparently once she looks in, like it like permeates like their minds. Like it's
like
because she didn't hear it from before, but now she can't stop hearing it, and even he can hear it
Yeah.
through the phone, like Darryl said. And he runs in and he's like, "It's my fucking mom and dad screaming."
Yeah, and then he throws a brick at the kiln and smashes it, releasing all the souls that are coming out like ghosts screaming.
Yeah, and all the pottery even like flies out too, and just like slams against the back of the wall, and then their kiln with all their kiln house like burns down, but the dad's still like kind of a little obsessed because he finds like a piece that still managed to survive in the wreckage. So then that's the end of that chapter. That ends with like, kind of like her dad still a little bit weird, and then we cut to like a completely different thing, not related.
Again, the point like has already sailed a long time ago, where I would have left this fucking town. Like, when the souls of these dead people are coming out of these potteries, you gotta cut your losses. And just get out of there.
Not everyone has the funds to do that, buddy.
I would run to the woods,
especially if that's a potter that no one's buying his creepy art.
I get the argument why people don't like evacuate storms and stuff, but like if ghosts and zombies were yelling out of my kiln, I'd be like, you know what? I'll just
and
live
some
in the
girl
woods.
was like consuming herself.
Yeah, at that point, you take your chances in the woods.
Yeah, exactly.
So
anyway,
then it cuts to she starts explaining that in this town there are row houses, which are these really long, like almost single room houses made from like really old wood, and some of them are dilapidated, and they're spread all throughout town. Like if they just built houses around them, in order to. They're just like, whatever. And all the poor people end up living in there. And what I love about this is this comes up at the end of the book, these houses. Yeah. And it's like knowing it and reading it and being like, this was a good like way to see this concept in. Because she says like they're everywhere throughout the whole
Because they're
town.
like these old rundown houses that like don't have the same modern architecture, and like they're all like chipped away wood and
it's like they're multifamily in different parts, so like you can hear people. Like these were real types of houses, like you know, this was like peasant housing like a long time ago, and you basically in this story get like this like Romeo and Juliet type thing where in this row house there's two families who fucking hate each other
at one end of each, like a single house at each
and
end.
the kids are in love, but the parents and stuff will scream at the walls like, you know, if that family had a fucking job, they would, you know, wouldn't be fucking parasites. And then you hear through the other side of the wall like, you bitch. like,
come say that to my face. Don't you speak about my son that way.
Yeah, so Kiari walks in on them like actually physically fighting because the one of the other sons is like beating up the Romeo in the situation, saying, "Stay away from my fucking sister, you piece of shit." Then they go home and they start yelling through the walls, "You fucking assholes! You fucking hit my son!" And the kids like Romeo's like, "Stop fighting!" Like, God damn it! And
you gotta keep an eye on that imbecile son of yours. I advise you to tie up your daughter.
Yep, and then it's like Romeo's yelling. He's like, "I can't stand it. Why can't you just let us be together?" And he like opens up the door and he's yelling for her.
And they beat him again.
Yeah, she opens up.
Yeah, and it's like this big romantic scene. Like he runs up his door and Julia opens the door too, and they start charging towards each other.
Yeah.
And the family stops them.
Yeah, the dads are pulling them both back, being like, "Stay away from them. You're embarrassing us."
And Kiari like is just like obsessed with this. She's like, I want to fix this. Like I want to make them happy, but she just like keeps coming back to watch.
I love too that she goes and the person she's talking to about this is Shuichi, who's just like wearing black and huddled in a corner and like holding his abdomen. He just looks so sick.
And he says like, "Oh, they're going to die. They're affected by a spiral. Forget about them. They're fucked. That's it, Kiari."
This was another weird part for me where I'm like, she's like talking to him. His parents' souls just came out of her dad's kiln like yesterday. Like just just be like, have some compassion here.
Yeah, I haven't had bad days, so we shouldn't be talking about my problems.
Yeah, these two lovers can't be together.
Yeah, these two other people. That's what I love about this guy, because every time she goes and sees him, he's just so miserable.
Yeah.
And then she's just like really oblivious.
Yeah.
Because he keeps telling her too. He's like, "I want to leave this town," and he's like, "I want to take you with me. Like, do you want to leave?" And she stands up and she's like incensed. She's like, "What? No, forget it. I won't ask for your help anymore." And she goes back and they're both yelling. Like the parents of Romeo and Juliet are yelling because they have both run off and they can't find where they are. And what has happened is they've ran to another abandoned row house and they're just like resting side by side together. And then they see these snakes come out, and these snakes are coiled up together. And the Juliet's like, "Oh my God, look, they're fighting just like our parents." And Romeo's like, "No, look, they're making love together." And then they like the snakes fall into the hole, and
So they slip into this hole, and then it just cuts to the two of them just like looking sad.
Yeah. Well, it's just like a little seated, like a little foreshadowing of, hey, guess what? So Kiari goes and she finds them, but it's too late by then because the parents also like spot them. And like
run-ins, the dad just always runs in and punches Romeo.
Yeah, and the dad comes in, he socks Romeo in the face, and then they drag off the daughter again for like the third time. And Kiari goes in, she's like, "Are you okay?" And he's laying down, like facing to the left, and then he turns around to see her, but he turns around right way, so his whole like spine twists around his body. And she's
I didn't notice this until the next panel. Like, at first, I
She
skimmed through it.
says, "I didn't notice it at first."
Yeah, but he's like obviously like fucking spaghetti. Like it's just like it's
noodles, actually.
Noodles,
It's in
yes.
Japan.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry. He's very udon and like
udonification.
yeah, and she's like, I didn't notice at the time, but yeah.
So Kyrie's like, "Hey, I'm gonna try and help them unload. I told them to like come here, and we'll get them. We'll take them to the train station." And Shuichi's like, "Eloping's a good idea." And then they start running together, but the parents are after them.
All four of them.
Yeah, Romeo and Juliet come and join up, and they're all running together. And then they make it down to the beach, but there's nowhere else to go. And the brother socks Romeo in the face again. And then he's laying down on the ground, and he's like, "Not this time, Juliet. We'll be together forever." And he starts just spinning around his body over and over. And he's like, "Hurry!" And she's like, "You got it." And she starts spinning around his body, and they get really stretchy. They go up into the air.
It's really hard to describe what this looks like, but if you've seen like if you've seen in like fantasy stuff, like what elementals look like, kind of when they swirl and they like have like the upper torso of a human being, but their whole bottom is like this like twisting spiral.
Yeah.
The thing is, we're laughing as we describe it, but it does still have like an element of body horror to it.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, especially if you're uncomfortable with this kind of stuff.
I do wish it was a bit more subtle because they're both. It seems like something some scenes out of this feel like a scene of a shonen. Like the Romeo says like I use your power, and they both like.
This is the only one that does
I
that.
think
though.
that's what takes away the horror element, is that this is supposed to be like, it's like part romantic, and I don't think it's one of those where they're really well, like they counter each other really well, because this is kind of just like weird how they're spiraling around. Like they reach out their hands and their hands spiral around. I mean, there's the good full page spread of their whole entire bodies basically being like two intertwined like ropes together.
Or snakes.
Yeah, with their heads just sticking out and their eyes are white. But then
when I say that, I just mean like I think this would have been done better if like they were holding on to each other so much they started intertwining, like because this is like they knew this was gonna happen. They're gonna activate their powers. Now they're gonna snake people.
This is the only one that did that, I think, but it was very.
I
weird.
will point out like 2 more instances where it feels like a show.
there's 2 more
I know what you're
definitely
talking about.
dumb stories
Okay,
coming up.
I know what you're talking about.
So they intertwine, and then the dad goes to try, like Juliet's dad tries to pull them apart. And he's like, they're like steel wire, and then they look down like condescendingly at them, and they're like, we're never going to be apart. That's right, we'll be together forever. And they just swim or like undulate into the water, and that's
They slither to sea.
yeah.
And then you have to think again. How does she not want to leave this town? When Shuichi's like, "Can we please elope too?" And she's like, "No, I think this is okay."
Maybe she saw this and she's like, how romantic. They broke all their bones and joints.
At a certain point, I assumed she was just like, also just fucked up in the head from this town, and she's just like, this stuff is okay to happen.
Yeah, or like it might be one of those things where she's like, I'd prefer not to live here, but this isn't enough to motivate them to leave.
Later on, she becomes like when things become more dire. She's like, I want to stay and help my family. Like I don't want to leave my family. But
yeah, she's really loyal to her family too. Is a big
yeah.
thing.
So like, but it doesn't come into play later. Like when they reveal like it's not that easy to leave town, and like her loyalty to the family, because it's not mentioned at all. They don't explain at all why she wasn't. She doesn't explain to Suichi why she doesn't want to leave. He just says it. And she's like, you're dumb, and she goes away.
Yeah.
So the next story starts up, and it opens with a kid that had killed himself by trying to do acrobatics on a handrail at school, and he had fallen off the roof, and he died, but he was smiling because people were paying attention to him. And it relates to the story because Kiari has a friend that really wants a lot of people to pay attention to her too.
And Kairi says like, why do you want that? Like I don't want people paying attention to me at all. Like I'd rather just blend to the background.
Yeah, and she goes to talk to Shuichi about this, and he's like, don't you see? This is spirals too. It draws you in, it possesses you, and mesmerizes you to follow it to the center.
Wanting attention is a spiral. Like if you want attention, that means you're possessed by a spiral.
Yeah.
So Donald Trump is a spiral life.
Spiral beam. So then Kairi starts combing her hair, and she starts noticing her own hair is turning into, like, it's curling up into spirals too. And suddenly everyone starts staring at her. She tries to turn it into a braid, but then it breaks out. It breaks the hairband, and it just spirals up. She goes to a beauty salon to try and get it permed, which I didn't realize this. The beauty salon, its symbol is a spiral, which is a very cute thing.
That.
Oh, I didn't notice that.
Yeah. And then they try and cut her hair, but then the hair attacks the hairdresser who's trying to cut her hair.
Yeah.
And her hair is literally like Medusa from Inhumans, just like spraying out in every direction. Like, I mean, I think this chapter is called Medusa too.
And whenever she tries to cut after that, or to go to the hospital try to get medical attention, starts choking her. So
It chokes her if she tries to do anything to it.
So all she can do is just have her hair on display as it spirals and grows longer.
Yeah, so it just shows her just like walking around with her hair shooting out in all directions and spiraling at the tips. She's just walking around school and
it like so she's like basically her hair slave, and everyone gets actually like hypnotized by it. Like her family's eyes are all spirals
and
looking at her
the
hair.
hair actually moves out to people, and it starts like spinning around to hypnotize them, and they're like, "Ugh."
This is the dumbest part of this whole book, I think.
I don't know. There's a story about a hurricane later that's really dumb.
I kind of like the Hurricane story in a weird way. His idea. I think this and Hurricane are both good ideas. I think it just goes a bit too goofy with the potential.
It goes so goofy because what happens is that she's like the hair's draining her of her life because it's like possessing her basically.
Eventually becomes like twice her size.
Yeah, and then one day she turns around and her classmate's standing there with her own giant black hair spirals, and she has just this shit-eating grin on her face, like, look at my hair.
And the classmate is like, see, now I have something worth looking at.
Yeah.
I won't lose to you.
Yeah, and
and
then
they have
their
a fucking
hair,
shonen spiral hair off.
their
Yeah,
hair
I forgot
starts
about
fighting
this.
each other by going shwa, shwa, as they're presumably spinning around and like moving around and trying to show off. And then her friend start getting like exhausted by this, and her friend's like, I've had enough, and she uses her hair to start choking Kiari, and then Kairi's hair starts trying to fight back against her, and she's parrying the hair, which is why it gets into like really shonen-y, like this hair duel.
Yeah.
But thankfully our hero Shuichi's here, and he pulls out scissors and he tries to cut their hair, but then Kairi's own hair grabs Shuichi and wraps him up into like a little bun, and it almost looks like it's like, oh no, are they gonna finally kill Shuichi? But as her friend marches off victoriously, because now everyone's staring at her spiraling hair, and Kairi has wrapped up Shuichi's, he starts cutting through it from the inside.
Like it's a creature, and he's cutting through his stomach out of it.
Yeah.
And then he explains that the hair, like, she could barely pay attention because it was draining all of her energy in order to grow. And as her friend is walking through town with her hair and she's yelling, like, everybody look at me. Like, she's slowly becoming kind of, like, skeletal and emaciated.
Yeah.
And so she goes over to, like, a lamppost, and she's like, I need more attention, but I'm really tired. And she starts collapsing, and her hair, like, crawls up it, and then just starts, like, making, like, tree branches that spiral off of it.
It's like a power pole or whatever, power line pole.
Yeah.
And it goes up and just starts going across the power lines too. It's like this huge spread of spirals.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then
she dies from this.
yeah,
And
she drops dead, and it shows, like, her skeletal face, and she just hangs there on the power pole.
And it ends with her hair remained on the telephone pole, displaying itself for several hours.
The next story is
Jack in the Box.
after like a really weird story, and then like a really weird, like, we're losing like direction here. Now we get a pretty I really like this story about this kid.
Yeah.
That
This kind of brings it back for me.
yeah, because you're starting to be like, what is this becoming? But there's this kid that jumps out and likes to scare Kairi, and it's because he likes her. You know, it's the little dumb kid thing where he's mean to her in order to get her attention and to get her to like him. And he keeps, like, popping out all the time. We should mention that her hair is now short, and it stays short for the rest of the series, which is nice. Again, continuity between everything.
And this kid's called Jack, so they call him Jack in the Box. That's the title. And what I like about this is it doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the spiral stuff. Like it does, like at the end, with the reveal. But it feels like a Tales from the Crypt story.
Yeah.
Inserted into this, because it's all about like this one character's defining trait coming back later on when things get spooky.
Oh, this is actually one of my favorite moments for Kairi, because he like keeps annoying her, and he like sends her a present, and she's like, I don't want this. And then he's just like, come on, I'm putting in so much time to like try to be with you. The least you could do is like opening my present. And she's like, to be honest, I'm getting really irritated. The more you pester me, the less I like you. And I didn't expect her, who's so far been pretty much just like an observer, to actually be like, no, fuck off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And but she does it in a pretty polite way, where it's like, this kid is pretty annoying.
Like, all he does is fucking scare. He doesn't even he doesn't have conversations with her, or
He jumps out of garbage and he jumps and scares them in the cemetery, and they're like, that's fucked up. Like,
Yeah. Which we should notice, like, we get some more delicious lore that they've stopped cremating people because they're like, okay, this is too weird that it keeps creating smoke in the sky. So they've started burying people now instead.
Yeah.
So
Which is important.
this kid keeps jumping out, and he's like, he gives her the box, like Ryan said. He's like, open it, and she's like, I really don't want this though. And he gets the dumb idea where he's like, I saw something like this on TV. I'm gonna run into the street and try and stop a car with my love. And so he runs into the street, and he does not stop that car.
No, he very much does
That
not.
car runs over him, and he gets caught in the wheel well with the
Oh my
tire.
God, it is such a terrible.
And
It is
drawing.
one of the most brutal panels in this entire book.
This is why I was like, I really like when he draws the grotesque stuff, because you see it and you're like, Jesus, of like just his head and his arm just caught in this wheel, and he's all bloody.
While
and
his
dead.
leg sticks out under the chassis of the car.
It's
Yeah.
like the worst thing because it's so grotesque that you'd be like, this could actually be.
Yeah.
And then you turn the
yeah.
page, and it's just like, let's just zoom in on that a little bit.
So, Kiari opens the box that
After his
she's
funeral.
feeling bad about after he died. Yeah, after his funeral, and they buried him in the ground. She opens the box, and inside the box is just a Jack in the Box, because they call them Jack in the Box. So you're like, just a little spook, like you could see it coming out like in a show or something.
Yeah.
And then Kyrie starts hearing it talk at night, and the Jack in the Box is saying, he died for you, didn't he? And now he'll come back for you. So she calls Shuichi, and she's like, okay, listen, I accept this town is pretty crazy with its spirals and stuff. So how about we go dig him up and make sure that he's still in the box and he's dead?
And Shuichi's like, we should stake him in the heart. And he takes a stake with him.
And she's like, he's not a vampire. And he's like, oh, everything else in this town is you accept, but you can't have vampires?
You told me a toy clown. A toy clown told you to go dig up this body, but nope, you can't be a vampire.
But no, I'm an idiot.
So I love this idea that she won't go, like, leave the town, but she will dig up this boy's corpse and stake him in the heart with her boyfriend. So they dig him up, and there's his coffin, and Shuichi starts trying to pry the nails open. They notice it smells, so there's definitely a corpse in there. And then, like, there's a front door or a little window on the coffin.
I guess coffins in Japan have windows.
That's weird.
And it opens, and they're like, oh, man, it really reeks in there. And then his head just, like, pops out, and he's started to decay. He has, like, all these sewn marks on his face from the scars.
It's so gross. He's bubbling at the mouth and stuff.
And
It's
they
like, and he's
say,
making noises.
and they say earlier at his funeral that like they had to take a blowtorch to get him out from under the car.
Oh,
and, like,
yeah, that's a good
He was all
detail.
mangled, so they have to they sewed him back up for the funeral.
Yeah.
So then his whole body just like springs out of this coffin, and he stands up, and they start running away, and he starts springing
Jumping
after them.
after them,
Yeah,
yeah.
like jumping
Yeah.
after them, like one of the hopping vampires.
And as he does so, his intestines start falling
God,
out.
Yeah, this is pretty gross. As his
is
stomach just bursts open, and his intestines drop to the ground, but he keeps jumping, and it shows like his leg fall off because he's literally decaying as he's moving. And then it shows like as more of him falls apart, out of his like as soon as his waist falls off, it shows that there's basically a spring in his body, like he is
Yes.
a Jack in the Box.
The
Yeah.
spring from the car, like the like
Yeah, it's the suspension.
something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is why I really like, because at first Shuichi says that his spine coiled into the spiral. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Well, I like it better that it was the way that he died is what gave him kind of like this power to spring after her. But as he jumps at Kyrie, he falls apart because he's dying, and then that's just it. And
It's really gross. It's really fucking gross.
Yep. And then we get another great story where it's always raining. Like whenever
Oh
it
my
rains
god! Oh, I
outside,
hate the story.
whenever it rains outside, there's this kid that shows up to class, and he's like, he's a
He
fat
only
kid.
shows up when it rains.
Yep, he's a
Yeah.
fat kid with big lips, and he's got like this kind of like doofy smile on his face.
Yeah.
He's like, "Hi guys," and they're like,
And he doesn't have an umbrella, so he like comes in just drenched.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's this nerd with buck teeth that basically keeps laughing and making jokes where he's like, he's the ultimate slowpoke. It takes him 10 times longer than anyone to get anywhere, and everyone's laughing at him. And
Well,
then-
Darryl says he's the geek, but he's kind of like the bully of this class. Like he keeps bullying.
He calls him a glacial turd.
Yeah, you see him sucking at Jim and just having this like sweaty look on his face. It's so weird. And then so after the gym class, they're like, "You fucking lost the game for us."
Well,
And
the
they
bully
take-
is.
Yeah, the
bully's a
bully.
geek.
And so they take off all his clothes and they start dragging him around naked on the floor. And
yeah,
he
and
looks-
they're just like laughing at him. It's the classic like super like overly rude bully.
and he's
stuff.
so sweaty and wet, even though it's not raining outside. Like they're inside now.
Yeah, but they
Yeah.
notice when they drag him out naked on the floor, like Kyrie sees in the hallway, he has a spiral pattern on his back, and you're like, ooh, it's an ominous spiral.
And he crawls away on the floor naked, leaving
Yep.
this like wet trail behind him.
Yep, and you're like, oh, that sounds like a snail. And guess what? He comes in the next day, and there's a bunched up spiral pattern on his back, and he's even wetter and sweatier. And he tries like sitting down, and he's like, it looks like I've swollen up. And like
The teacher's like, what the fuck?
his back is so huge. He comes in like a day later, and his back's even bigger. Like it's a noticeable like hunchback type of thing.
Yeah.
Yep. And then finally he comes in, and he's crawling on the floor, basically naked. With his back is now like a shell.
He's a snail with like a human front, basically, like a
It's
centaur snail.
Fucked up, y'all.
And he goes to sit in his desk too. He has legs, kind of still. So, and they show his ass again.
You might like this might sound silly, like, oh, this guy's turned into a snail, but it is a snail. I'll never look at snails the same way. Like,
How did you look at snails before?
I thought they were kind of cute always.
like that's why this is interesting, because I can imagine like Ito like looking at like a snail, and like if you think about it, a snail is a pretty like alien kind of life form. Like
Yeah.
like it has like it's like this weird texture. It's like slimy, has a shell. But you don't ever think about it. And he took that element and applied it to like what if a person turned into this weird, strange creature.
Yep. So the kid crawls into class and he sits down, and then they notice that it's like, because this keeps happening like every day, it keeps transforming, and finally on the next day there is a giant snail on the side of their like building, and it has just his face.
And
But
this is the fucking part though, because they see him
Yes,
up on the
yes.
wall, and it's his eyes get bulbous, and then they stretch out.
Yeah, like antennas, like a snail's antennas, which is like that's the kind of detail you want in like a really affected body.
And
horror.
at this point now, Kiari is saying, she's pointing up, she goes, he's cursed by the spiral. So she believes it now.
yeah.
And they're like, let's call his parents. And then the parents show up and they're like, that's a snail. That's not our son. It's like
Yeah.
it's like this Kafka-esque thing where like they're like it is like he's so much a snail now that no one recognizes him anymore. So they're just like, ew, let's get this fucking snail out of here. And the parents are like, they leave. They're like, this is a joke.
Yeah.
Like,
So they
it's
use
not
a
our
brush
son.
and they ply him off of the side of the building, and he drops down into a mat, and then they just keep him kind of like in a cage near the school where he's
they
just
feed him
eating
lettuce and
grass.
stuff.
Yeah,
It's like a pet, like a
and
school
then
pet.
the bully's like poking his face and his eyes, and because he's
Like he's not human, so I can do this now.
And then it does like another nice foreshadowing that we get to see slowly as the bully's like drinking a lot of water, and they're like, hey man, like his friends are like, you sure are drinking a lot of water. He's like, what, aren't you guys thirsty? And then the next day he's like, hey guys, wait up, as he's slowly walking to class.
Why are you guys running so fast? Like, come on, guys, slow down a bit.
Yep. And then eventually the bully, like, days go by and he appears on the side of the building as a snail, except what I like hate about it, and what hate is in like love about this, is whereas the other kid like kind of turned mostly into a snail, this guy still has like his hair, his
And
gross
his teeth.
unibrow, his teeth as he's crawling up the side of the building. It's really grotesque to see
my
like more of a human face snail there.
And then the school just puts him in the same cage, and they're like, look, he was a bully before, but now they're getting along, and they're
And
like,
they start having sex.
yeah, they're like, what the hell? And they're
And they're
like,
like, they're both men. And then he's like, no, snails are hermaphrodites. So they're just like fucking and stuff.
Yeah. It just adds on to this more like, oh god, like what a nightmare life that would be
Yeah,
to
you
live.
turn to a fucking snail and start fucking like your bully.
Yeah, and then they both escape, and then they lay eggs in the ground that they buried. And
oh my god, I forgot about this. And the teacher's like, we have to destroy these eggs. They're no longer human.
Abominations.
So he smashes all their eggs, and then the very end of the story is the teacher crawling into class as an eggy snail. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah, this is like, wow.
He's like a snail, but like has like egg pattern on him.
Oh, god damn it,
Yeah.
guys.
And then it ends, and she's still like, well, that's life here.
Yeah.
So that story ends, and you're like, Jesus, like, for me, that's one of the greatest signs of like Get Out, because now it's people literally from the school that are turning into snails and getting affected.
I mean, one human snail is whatever. 2 human snails, shame on me. But 3 human snails.
Won't turn into a snail again.
Yeah, so we're gonna just leave. We're gonna stay in this town, but what about this lighthouse that just all of a sudden one night starts having a glow come out of it and
And
swirling like a tornado?
Yeah, it's like a swirling glow that when people like they stand by and they see it, and it really blinds them. But what ends up happening is like when they stare at it long enough, they start walking in circles around town. They're like, no, like I'm definitely like I'm going home. When Kyrie like sees one of the old ladies,
Yeah.
and she's like, but it's taking longer than usual, and she's just walking in a circle.
Yeah, everyone gets hit by this light, starts just walking in circles, like it gets mesmerized by it.
and she gets like paler and sweatier. The people are like, "Oh my god, I can't walk straight. I'm going crazy." And then some kids, including Kiari's whatever her name is, little brother.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's called Kiari. I think
It's definitely Kiari, but
yeah.
I don't want to like
shame Baka Gaijin Darryl.
Yeah, I want to stay consistent. So Kairi's little brother is.
I was just going off of like Kingdom Hearts.
I know. I was like, it's definitely not Kairi. I know how Kairi. It's not Kairi.
It's fine. So her little brother's going with her friends into the lighthouse to go like
Yeah,
check
because
it out.
they want to see what's at the top because they think it's cute because the lights are almost like laser beams from a robot spinning around.
And they're like such like 12-year-old boys where they're like in bathing suits, like playing on rocks and like, let's go up in the lighthouse. It's awesome.
And in a lot of American horror stories, children never die. This story does not have the same protection for kids.
which was like the most surprising thing for me when rereading it. I was like, wow, he goes
Did
for
we
it.
skip that they did send a crew up in the lighthouse that disappeared?
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
So they
yeah.
send a crew up, but no one came back. So that's why, like, Kairi knows to make sure that no one goes up here. So she sees her brother and his friends run in. So she starts climbing it up, and as she's climbing, she feels like it's going on like forever.
It's like a spiral
Keeps going.
staircase that goes up forever,
Yep.
and the walls become spirally.
Yep, and it's eerie patterns that start to like glow in the dark and stuff. And she's like, the lighthouse has become part of the spiral. And as she goes up, she starts smelling burning. And eventually she comes upon a full-page spread of the people that went up into the lighthouse, and it's just their charred corpses sitting on like the stairs. And she goes up further than that, and she finds some boys just like sitting because they're way too afraid to go up to the top to see what's up there. And she tells them to go home, and then she goes up and she sees the so the lens that was up there was a Fresnel lens, which has a bunch of circular patterns, but this thing has turned into a giant melting spiral is the easiest way to like put it.
Yeah.
I really like this image, but I found it really funny that they explained that it was a specific type of lens that had concentric circles that melted to a spiral, because I was like, at this point, you could just tell me it's a spiral and like, that's fine. Like, you don't have to
No, but
explain
it's
why.
a lot of this is about like the crescent scar on the girl's head. It's about turning circles into spirals.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So this thing seems like pretty crazy, and all the melty parts of it are all like it's all the glass in the lens that melted from the heat. And she realizes as the sun's going down that if the glass had melted and it like pooled onto like a solid substance on the floor, that it's gonna eject a whole bunch of heat when the light comes on. So she tries to get the boys out. She's like, you guys need to run down. They start running down the stairs.
She also you can tell that's probably why the other guys got burnt to death.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and eventually as they're running, one of the kids that's not her brother trips, and she goes to reach for him, and this kid, just a fireball, shoots down the stairs, and Ito just draws his kid getting immolated.
And that concludes the first half of Uzumaki.
It's gonna get crazier.
Man.
That was the less crazy part,
Yes,
yeah.
certainly.
Yeah.
So, I know we don't usually do two-parters in a row, but too bad, Scrubs. You're going to have
Too
to deal
bad?
with it. Yes, too bad. So, next episode, we will pick it up from here with chapter, 10? Yeah,
10,
chapter
yeah.
10 of Uzumaki. And if you... This is, and you can, like, the whole thing is in one big volume that's, like, not expensive at all. I got it for, like, $20 on Amazon. I really recommend you read it before then if you like this first half, because it is excellent. But in the meantime, you should check out our bonus episodes. We have a new Patreon backer that specifically asked us to thank the King of Kings himself, Josiano.
Oh,
Thank you, Joe.
Joe.
So thank you so much,
Wait,
Joe.
I'm Joe.
You're new Joe. You're new 52
right.
You're
Joe.
Earth 2 Joe.
Yeah,
Wait,
whatever.
who am
we
I?
said.
I'm Joe too?
You're Bizarro Joe.
Yeah.
Biz Joro.
Goddamn.
Please put me out of my misery.
Yeah, so also check out the rest of the shows, the Flying Machine Network, flyingmachine.network. They all have good Patreon bonus episodes. I especially like the Pot Stirrer podcast episodes that are on the Patreon, because Jay goes into even more detail than on our usual episodes, which are very detailed and well-researched. So last month, for example, Jay went into more detail about the Baker case, where it went all the way up to the Supreme Court, and even though it aired on it didn't really air on the side of the baker, though a lot of people thought they did, about whether the baker is allowed to not bake cakes for certain people on religious grounds. So Jay goes into a lot more of the legal precedent that sets or doesn't set, and it breaks down something that I didn't really understand fully until the episode. So you should
That's
check.
cool.
Yeah, you should check that out on the Patreon, patreon.com/Flying Machine. And thank you again, Joe. You're the best.
Thank you, Joe.
And we will be back in 2 weeks for the next half of Uzumaki. Oh, and also, I mention it every once in a while, but one of the newish episodes of We'll Get It Right Next Year, I think it's the most recent one, a bunch of listeners sent in fan fiction about me and Michael, and it is a wild ride. So I recommend everybody listens to that if you haven't listened to my other show before, because it is very silly and very funny. So, yeah. Check that out. Just search We'll Get It Right Next Year on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever.
So, next time on Divisive Issues, mosquitoes, more snails, and hurricanes.
Stay tuned.
And a big ass spiral.
Yes. Thank you all for listening. I've been turning to a snail.
I can't eat miso soup without spiral fish cakes.
I've been entwining like a snake with Sly.
And I've been a spiral artist.
Stay in continuity.